Hey there, TPGtech squaddies. Today I've got a more elaborate topic to discuss just for you, which is explaining disk partitioning and formatting. I've decided to cover quite a few of my bases here to put forth my best in providing the most information that I can just for you guys. I hope that the video does give you a at least decent understanding of what a file system and a partition is, and how it actually is utilized by your drive. But before we get started, make sure you execute that like, comment, and subscribe buttons, as it really helps out the channel a whole bunch and improves the quality and consistency of the content I can provide for you guys. And alrighty, let's crack right into this case. We will first be starting out with a simple take on how a drive operates to better facilitate understanding for formatting itself. Persistent drives, or just storage drives in this case, must have at least one data partition in order for it to actually be used to store information, or function at all. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of unallocated space. Think of a partition as a like a water bottle, or like a jug. It vary in size or something like that, with three different forms that do exist from my knowledge, or what I could research. There's the primary partition, which is the primary partition that's used for data storage and handling. As its name says, the extended partition, which is a partition that's capable of holding logical partitions, and the logical partition itself, which acts the same as the primary partition, except it can't be booted to at all. Now, we will discuss what a boot sector is, as it is extremely important to at least have a basic knowledge of exactly what it is. A boot sector is essentially a partition handler that is at the front, or is at the beginning of your disk that comes before a partition. And it can determine how many partitions can be had and how large they can be. There are two standards that are relevant for your use: GPT, GUID partition table, and master boot record, or MBR. We will be discussing master boot record first because it's kind of the older of the two and the most prevalent from my knowledge, at least. MBR allows you to have a max of 4 primary partitions. You can somewhat go around this by replacing the 4th partition slot with an extended partition. It also limits the size of each partition to roughly 2 terabytes, which is pretty inconvenient and very noticeable if you were to use it and on like a your main desktop large storage hard drive. GPT, on the other hand, is a newer standard that seeks to replace MBR by providing key improvements. With GPT, you can have at max 128 primary partitions, and each can have a storage space of this much. I didn't feel like counting the zeros, okay? It was a little bit too much. But these two boot sectors have their own conventional uses to you. MBR, despite its limitations and its elderly age, is still widely used, as GPT isn't compatible with the BIOS, which is the ROM standard for older systems. So keep that in mind. You will usually see MBR being used for USB drives or external media and stuff like that that you would hot swap quite a bit, just for compatibility reasons. So keep that in mind. Now, with those two out of the way, we can finally talk about the elephant in the room, which are file systems. I'll be honest, file systems are probably the most complex of the subject matter that we have today, so I'll get down to describing the file systems that I think would be more important for a basic understanding. And in the future, I could potentially go into more depth and detail about them, but for the sake of the video, this is just to primarily get a basic understanding and understand how formatting exactly works. Alright, a file system manages how files are handled and stored on your drive. For instance, they maintain file information such as file names, locations, fragmented data, and application data. File systems also maintain file directories and allow duplicate files to exist at all. This is only the very basic features of a file system. As I stated, there are many file systems that function differently and have many different purposes. Probably a file system that you are the most acquainted with is FAT32, or File Allocation Table 32. Despite its age, it is one of the most common file systems in use because of its just amazing compatibility. As it is fairly old, it does have some noticeable limitations to it. You cannot have a file that's over 4 gigabytes in size on a FAT32 system. And you also cannot have a partition that's over 8 terabytes, which is less noticeable or less of a problem, but that 4 gigabyte limitation is pretty big. Its primary usages, though, are on conventionally small flash drives or installation media. Alright, next up is the newer variant of FAT, which is exFAT. It is essentially an upgraded version of FAT32 as it doesn't have any real limitations to it and benefits from having compatibility across most of the major operating systems. You will usually see these on external hard drives or something like that. Alright, next up, let's get into more niche file systems, starting with the Windows standard NTFS, or New Technology File System. I bet you didn't know that. NTFS, like exFAT, has no limitations to individual files and comes with a lot of expanded features to facilitate its usage in the Windows environment, as encryption, disk compression, disk quotas, to name a few of them. It is primarily used for Windows for large file handling and recovery. Next up is Linux's ext4, or Extended File System 4. Which uses an elaborate journaling system to maintain file integrity, as well as many other features that I will not be covering in detail because these mad lads are they thought of just virtually everything. ext4 in particular is a great step up from ext3, as it doesn't have any real limitations except with some compatibility with other operating systems, but is able to be at least read on most systems, unlike other formats, for example, NTFS. And Windows just generally doesn't like anything that's not dealing with Windows or is super old. Next up is HFS Plus, which is being phased out but still widely used enough that I am going to mention as Apple's, hallmark file system, which stands for Hierarchical File System Plus with the plus mark. And it is similar to ext in that it is a journaling file system, and it's supported by Linux. It's completely unsupported by Windows. Windows absolutely hates anything dealing with anyone else, as I said before. It also benefits from not having any real limitations, but file size limitations vary upon Mac OS versions, as the good old Macintosh people need to update and make everything obsolete. So does their file system, and it is just pretty strange from what I could research, because I'm not very personally experienced with Mac. I have never owned a Mac computer. The only thing I've had is just an eMac that it was too fat to fit in my apartment, and I didn't bother carrying it because it was virtually just a brick, even though it worked. So alrighty, we've covered all the file systems that I wanted to talk about, and we now have an understanding of how our disk partitions and its file systems and how they differ in function and capabilities. If you have any specific information about this topic that you want me to cover, feel free to let me know. That's it for this topic today, guys. We will be moving ahead with another video on how to actually format in Windows. Alrighty guys, see you in the next video. Peace out. Hey, glad to see you made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. TPG out.